Gonzaga's highest priority recruit in the 2026 class is rocketing up the rankings. Is that good or bad news for the Zags?
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Randy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode of Locked On Zags is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off your first year. Well, folks, the NCAA tournament expansion is back in the news, as it so often is around this time every single year. We'll talk about that to close out the show. Also, the Pac-12 and Mountain West continue their mediation. We haven't heard a lot of updates, which is why we haven't talked a ton about it on the show. But with the June deadline passing, we do have some updates on that conversation and what it means for Gonzaga. We'll get to that a little later in the show, but we are leading off the show with On3's updated class rankings for the 2026 recruiting class. We've been talking quite a bit about 2026 recruits here on Locked On Zags the last few weeks, as Gonzaga's name has been connected to quite a few of the best players in the entire recruiting class. So been kind of nice to see Mark Few and the staff get more involved in high-level high school recruiting, something that, you know, hasn't been a huge part of their success really throughout Mark Few's tenure as the coach at Gonzaga, but also recently, the last couple of years, they haven't had any super high-profile freshman additions, you know, kind of since the big additions with the Tricky Trio and then Chet Holmgren and Hunter Salas, and after that, it's been a little bit quieter on the recruiting trail. But as Gonzaga gets set to transition into the Pac-12, which we'll talk about later, I think there's some optimism that maybe we'll have a little bit more money to play with starting in that 26-27 college basketball season. So it makes sense to maybe go after some of the bigger fish in the 2026 recruiting class. Right now, the main names Gonzaga has been connected to in 2026 are point guard Ikenna Elozi, small forward Tyran Stokes, power forward Tony Bryant, and then center Sam Funches. And there's also been some rumors a couple of months ago about another small forward in the class named Dean Ruckert. So those are the names we're going to focus on here. We're going to start with the name that has been most closely connected to Gonzaga, the only player in the 2026 class that has a known offer from Mark Few and the Gonzaga Bulldogs, and that is center Sam Funches. Funches moved up 10 spots in On3's updated 2026 class rankings. He was the 41st ranked prospect in their previous top 150. He has now moved up to 31. So a 10-spot jump for Sam Funches. He remains the 4th-ranked center in the class. That's where he was previously. So didn't jump any other centers in the class, but is still a top 5 player at his position in the 2026 class and is now a borderline top 30 player in the entire class. There's no update on Funches' recruitment from the last time we spoke, but for those of you who would like an update, Funches reached out to me specifically to let me know that he's planning to visit Gonzaga, and he is planning to visit either this month at the end of the month. He gave me the dates, which are the dates that overlap with Hoop Fest, late June. So we know Gonzaga has used Hoop Fest as a recruiting weekend in the past. It appears they're trying to do so again as well. And for Funches, he's either going to visit for Hoop Fest or he was going to visit for Craziness in the Kennel, which does not have an official date, but it's probably going to be October 4th. It may be October 11th, but it's going to be one of those weekends in October. So we can expect that Funches will either be on campus in a couple weeks or later towards the start of the college basketball season. He's a 7-foot center from Germantown, Mississippi. He was actually supposed to visit Gonzaga back in February, but that visit got canceled because his team was still in the high school state playoffs. And so he rode them all the way to a national or to a state championship appearance and a victory. In fact, they won the state championship for Funches, and that's a pretty justified reason to miss a visit. And hopefully the Zags can impress him as he is being heavily pursued by Ole Miss and Kansas and Cal and Mississippi State. Vanderbilt, LSU are also in the mix as well. For Gonzaga, they're also pursuing the number 1 ranked recruit in the entire 2026 class. That is Tyran Stokes. Tyran Stokes remains number 1 overall in On3's updated class rankings, and they've separated. Tyran Stokes was very close with the number 2 player, Brandon McCoy, who's a likely Duke commit. Now Tyran Stokes is pretty clearly the number 1 player in the 2026 class, one of, if not the best player in all of high school basketball. He is built like an absolute unit, 6'7", 245 pounds for Stokes. He is an incredible athlete, super high-level basketball player, would be an extraordinary get on par with Chet Holmgren for Gonzaga if they were able to make this happen. They have some heavy competition. Arkansas is in the mix. Kansas is in the mix. Louisville, Kentucky, they're all the favorites right now. Oregon is in the mix as well. However, it has been indicated that Stokes plans to visit Gonzaga. He told ESPN's Paul Biancardi that a few weeks ago. No date has been set for that visit, so it's kind of a, hey, we'll believe it when we see it type of thing. But certainly if Gonzaga was able to get, even just getting the number one recruit in the class onto campus would be a nice win for the staff. But certainly you'd like to see them be able to bring this incredibly talented player to Spokane, at least for a year, as I don't think he's going to spend more than 1 year in college basketball. After that, the most recent player to be connected to Gonzaga in the 2026 class is Akena Alozie. He is the number 10 ranked player in the class. That's where he was previously at On3, so that has not changed. He is the number 2 ranked point guard. He was initially the number 1 ranked point guard in the class, but he has been jumped at On3 by Dylan Mingo, who they have all the way up at number 4 in the recruiting class. But Alozie is still a incredibly highly regarded 5-star talent in this 2026 class. He's at Dream City Christian Academy in Arizona. He did tell Joe Tipton a week or so ago that he is planning to visit Gonzaga, quote, sometime in June. Obviously, for the Zags, I think they would love to have both Alozie and Sam Funches on campus at the same time. That tends to help with recruiting. Get both those guys on there, show them a great time, convince them how great they would be playing together for Gonzaga's first ever season in the Pac-12. It makes a ton of sense. Number 1 point guard in the class, number 4 center in the class. They'd play great ball together if they wanted to do it, but a lot of the same teams that are interested in Stokes and Funches also interested in Alozie right now. He has plans to visit Kentucky, Kansas, Houston, and Louisville. That is quite a group of teams for Gonzaga to be competing against. He also has already taken visits to both Arizona and Washington, so lots of teams in the mix there for Alozie. Next up is Tony Bryant, the highly regarded prospect that Gonzaga is pursuing. That's kind of, they have the loosest connection to at this point. Tony Bryant actually was a faller in this recruiting class from number 13 to number 24 in On3's upgraded class rankings. He's the 4th ranked power forward in the class. He's drawing interest from a lot of great programs, Duke and Kentucky, Kansas, Mizzou has been in on him for a long time, Gonzaga, and of course a handful of others. He's a 6'10" power forward from Zephyr Hills Academy in Florida. He has an official visit scheduled to North Carolina, who is considered the front runner right now for Tony Bryant's services. That visit is in September. Zags have seen him in person. We know that they send scouts out or send a coach out to watch him in person, but no visit, no offer known at this time. So he's kind of a bit of a wait and see in terms of how interested Gonzaga is and how interested he is in Gonzaga at this point, obviously with a pretty tremendous group of schools already in the mix for his services. And then last, and I usually say last but not least, but in this case, at least according to the rankings, Dean Ruckert, who Gonzaga contacted back in early March. He's a 6'7" small forward from Provo, Utah. He was a very significant faller in On3's updated rankings. He was 55th previously in their class rankings. He has fallen all the way down to 138th, barely staying on3's top 150 rankings. He's now a 3-star prospect. He was not only a 4-star prospect previously, he used to be higher than 55th in the class, so it has been a bit of a fall for Ruckert as he has not played particularly well on the summer circuits. He's focusing on Stanford and UW for the most part right now. BYU is considered in the mix, although I think BYU has kind of pulled off a little bit. The leader in the clubhouse, according to On3, is Stanford, which makes some sense in the sense that Washington has already brought in some good young players for this class. BYU's got seemingly endless amounts of NIL money, so they may be looking elsewhere where Stanford might be a solid fit for Ruckert. Again, Gonzaga's interest was reported back in early March. There hasn't been any updates in that regard, so it's possible the Zags have backed off here. It's also possible they are still in the mix and we just haven't heard any updates, but I'm kind of leaning towards it being the former, especially as the interest in Ruckert was reported well before Gonzaga was known to be connected to Stokes or Alozie or Bryant or any of the other bigger names in the class, which makes me think they've turned their attention elsewhere in this specific situation. We'll have more updates on all of these guys, on Funches, on Stokes, on Alozi, on Bryant, as we hear more things as Gonzaga's pursuit of these 2026 players continues to pick up this offseason. But now we're going to switch gears completely. We're going to talk about the 5 Mountain West schools that officially gave notice that they are joining the Pac-12 as mediation between the two conferences rolls on. We're going to talk about what this means for Gonzaga, what might be coming next in this conference realignment saga, all that coming up in just a second. But first, folks, have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Because between dining out, online shopping, and just general entertainment costs, it's pretty easy to lose track. And that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. And Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it is a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. And instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to track your finances, track spending, and even plan your long-term goals. And it's perfect for our family. My wife and I, we love to always make sure we are on the same page when it comes to our finances. And thankfully with Monarch Money, managing money with your partner is smoother than ever before. You can track your shared and personal accounts, set collective goals together, and stay on the same page without all the added stress and hassle. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. Moving away from our conversation about the updated class rankings in 2026 and what it means for the players Gonzaga is pursuing out of that recruiting class to instead talk conference realignment, a topic that we haven't really discussed much on the show this offseason, despite the fact that we know Gonzaga is moving into the Pac-12 starting in the 2026-27 season. This upcoming year will be their final year as a member of the West Coast Conference. But the reason we haven't talked a lot about the Pac-12's pursuit of an additional member and the media rights deal is because we just haven't really heard any updates. It's been incredibly quiet on the Western Front as it regards to the Pac-12. And so we just haven't had a lot to really say, and speculation just hasn't really led anywhere. So we just kind of said we'd let it breathe and we'll get some updates when we get some updates. And it does sound like those updates are coming down the pipeline, but that's been something we've been hearing for a while and haven't actually seen any fruition from that up to this point. But June 1st was the deadline for the Mountain West schools. That would be Boise State, San Diego State, Utah State, Fresno State, and Colorado State. Those 5 schools needed to give notice, official notice, to the Mountain West that they were leaving the conference to join the Pac-12 in order for the exit fee to remain at $18 million per school. Starting on June 1st, if that notification was not received, the exit fee would double from $18 million to $36 million, as it would be within one calendar year of the actual move happening. So, as expected, widely expected, the 5 schools officially gave their notice to the Mountain West that they were leaving for the Pac-12. This was effectively a formality. There was very little expectation that this would not happen. However, currently, the Pac-12 and the Mountain West are engaged in mediation as they are trying to settle a lawsuit regarding a handful of things between these two conferences, including exit fees, poaching fees, penalties, the pursuit of UNLV as a potential member, lots of different things that have been summarized much more clearly by other folks in the media. John Canzano doing a great job of covering the conference realignment and the Pac-12 Mountain West media rights negotiations. There are others John Wilner is doing a great job as well. There are others, but those are kind of the main 2, I think. But because this mediation is ongoing, there's been radio silence from both sides. We have heard very little about this mediation, about what's being discussed, about a timeline for it to be resolved, and all of that. So again, that's why we're kind of stuck in a bit of a standstill at this point. Some things to note. UNLV did not give notice to the Mountain West that they are leaving, which kind of puts the kibosh on the thought that some people had, which was that UNLV would end up being the final full member addition to the Pac-12 in this cycle. As a reminder, for those of you out there, those 5 Mountain West schools are joining Oregon State and Washington State to form 7 full members of the Pac-12 conference. Gonzaga is a full member in the sense that they are joining the Pac-12 with every sport that the Pac-12 sponsors, but Gonzaga, of course, does not have a football team, and the Pac-12 is looking to be a full They want to be a full conference competing in football, and of course be able to then compete for national championships and compete to make the college football playoff. In order to do that, they need to have 8 full members, and full members is a key word here. They cannot add a team who just brings their football team to the Pac-12 and houses the rest of their sports elsewhere. That is not something they can legally do and have it count as a full member. So if you hear rumors of like, oh, maybe they'll just bring like Memphis football and Memphis basketball, and they'll keep the rest of their sports in the American Athletic Conference. I think that that is potentially something that could happen, but it would not work as the lone addition for the Pac-12. They have to add a school who brings every sport to the Pac-12 and has football. That has to happen, by the way, within the next month. That has to happen by July 1st. That's not debatable, negotiable, anything like that. That has to happen. Some had hoped that UNLV would be that school, or at least thought that UNLV would be that school. Some thought it would happen and really didn't want it to happen. Some thought it would happen and hoped it would happen. Regardless, it's probably not going to happen. Now, again, the Pac-12 and the Mountain West are currently negotiating things, including exit fees. So the fact that the exit fee went from 18 million to 36 million overnight on June 1st doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't try to negotiate something there. But I think it's very, very, very unlikely at this point. It was already pretty unlikely. If the Pac-12 wanted to take a bunch of Mountain West schools, they would have taken more than the 5 they took initially. Like this UNLV wasn't on their radar at the time as a school they desperately needed to have, and I don't think that has changed, even with this deadline rapidly approaching. What that does mean is that the likeliest outcome, at least in my opinion and the opinion of many who are following this story on a regular basis, is that the Pac-12 will grab Texas State to be their final full member addition. Texas State, not a particularly appealing addition from a basketball perspective. They are a remarkably average men's basketball program. Historically, the last decade, half decade, have been marginally better than Fresno State, marginally better than Oregon State. That's about it. Certainly not as good as Boise State, San Diego State, Utah State, or Colorado State. Not as good as Washington State. Obviously, don't hold a candle to Gonzaga. So they, in this 8-9 men's basketball member conference, they would probably be 7th, 8th, somewhere like that. To put it into some other perspective, they would probably be middle of the pack in the WCC, a little below middle of the pack. Like, this is a program that's probably closer to LMU or somebody of that ilk. So it's not an appealing addition for Gonzaga necessarily. It gets the conference in Texas, which is appealing to the conference, which is appealing to them from a football perspective. It's not a horrible addition for Gonzaga. Like, it's better than Sacramento State. Even though Sac State's trying to do some fun stuff right now, they are a horrendous men's basketball program. Maybe Mike Bibby can turn it around with some of Shaq's money, but I'm not super confident that that's going to happen. So this is fine. And again, it's not confirmed. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they make a big pull and land somebody else. But without a media rights deal known at this point, the amount of money that these schools are getting is not expected to be significantly bigger than what the American Athletic Conference is currently paying out schools like Memphis and Tulane and Rice and UTSA and South Florida and all the other programs that have kind of drawn some attention. And while I think the Pac-12's payouts are going to be bigger than the American Athletic payouts, that's the expectation, those schools are not viewing it as worth the incredible extra headache that traveling to the Pac-12 would be for all of their sports, which is why satellite options where they just send football and men's basketball, men's and women's basketball to the Pac-12 and keep everything else in the conference have been floated as potential rumored things that could happen. But for the Pac-12, they're focusing right now on these things in this order. And I think this is the important detail for fans, Gonzaga fans in particular, to kind of take out of what's going to happen next. The first thing is to settle mediation with the Mountain West Conference. Nothing else is going to happen until that happens, unless the settling with the Mountain West goes all the way until July 1st, in which case the Pac-12 will have to scramble and grab somebody, which again would probably be Texas State. Number 2 is then grabbing your 8th full member. You got to do that. You got a month to do that. You got to knock it out. It's just, there's, again, time is of the essence here. Number 3 is then announcing your media rights deal. They know their media partners for the upcoming 2025 season when it's just Oregon State and Washington State, but the actual media rights deal that we will have when Gonzaga is in the mix, when this is a full conference that has not just football and basketball, but also soccer and baseball and volleyball and all the other sports, we will have a media rights deal for that coming up fairly soon. Whether ESPN's involved because they love Gonzaga, whether Gonzaga fans will have to turn elsewhere to ESPN. Maybe it's Fox, maybe it's the CW, maybe it's streaming, maybe it's a combination. I'm going to tell you right now, it's probably going to be a combination of those things. I think there's a chance that Gonzaga games eventually are on the CW, but I think it'll be like Gonzaga versus Fresno State or Gonzaga versus Texas State. I think their marquee games will end up on a different network. Maybe it is ESPN. Maybe it is Fox. Maybe you get some streaming opportunities that show up as well. Maybe that's something that some of you are excited about. Maybe not so much. We'll see kind of what happens there, but it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. For what it's worth, many people involved in this have a pretty good sense of what this media rights deal is going to look like. We just don't know because they haven't really released anything yet. But there was a pretty good quote from the athletic director of San Diego State, John David Wicker. He was speaking to boosters at an athletic department event about a week ago. And he basically said, I'm very pleased where we are from a Pac-12 standpoint. And he said, we have to add another team. That'll happen. I have a good idea of what our TV is going to look like with the Pac-12. Right now, we're trying to wrap up various items around that. But we have a really good idea of what that will be. And we're pleased with what that is going to be. It feels like the next 4 or 5 weeks, there's a lot of that that's going to happen that's going to help dictate where we're at moving forward. The exact kind of quote you'd expect an AD to deliver to boosters. It's not telling you a whole lot of information. Of course, he's excited about the media rights deal. Why would he say anything otherwise to the boosters? So you got to take it with a bit of a grain of salt. The interesting part being that he's expecting a lot of updates in the next 4 to 5 weeks. I think that's the key talking point here. Last thing I'll say on this topic, John Kinzano has reported that St. Mary's is kind of in a holding pattern, but that they are still awaiting potential information or updates on their recruitment from the Pac-12 conference. The expectation is that, of course, the Pac-12 will prioritize, as I just laid out, the media rights deal or mediation, the 8th full member and the media rights deal. All of those things come before looking at St. Mary's as a potential basketball addition, but it is still on the table. And it is something that we will discuss more as we kind of get some of these information and we kind of get this checklist starting to actually get some boxes on it for the Pac-12, because once they do that, we might get some information on whether they are going to pursue a potential addition like St. Mary's or even a pulling Memphis basketball and football from the AAC, if that's an option for them as well. So we'll continue to keep you up to date on this as we hear more information. But the reason we haven't talked much about it is because there just haven't been a lot of updates. But at least according to one person, the athletic director at San Diego State, that might be changing in the next month or so. Well, folks, speaking of things that might be changing somewhat rapidly, NCAA Commissioner Charlie Baker turned a lot of heads last week with his comments about the potential imminence of NCAA tournament expansion, a long, heated, discussed topic of conversation. We're going to break that down coming up to close out the show in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, closing out the show with a topic that's going to come up pretty much every single offseason. It has come up, I think, multiple times every single offseason that I have done the show, but it may not be coming up next year because it may be already resolved. Charlie Baker, the commissioner of the NCAA, speaking at the Big 12 spring meetings about a week or so ago, as you're listening to this show, said that NCAA tournament expansion might be coming as soon as 2026, which when I first saw that headline, I thought, wow, how are they going to get this done before this, not this upcoming season, but the following season? Then I realized, no, he's talking about this year. He's talking about the next NCAA tournament that's going to happen, potentially being expanded. That seems incredibly, ludicrously bold to think that that could possibly happen. It also, I'll read his quote here directly. He said, that would be the goal, to try and do it for this next year. We've been talking about 72 and 76 teams. Here's the thing. This is I wrote in my notes, far cry. But what I really mean is the opposite. This is the opposite of what the NCAA senior vice president for basketball operations, Dan Gavitt, said 2 months ago when he said, quote, the decision for the NCAA tournament expansion was, here's the quote, unlikely to come soon. So Dan Gavitt is saying we don't expect even a decision on whether we're going to expand the NCAA tournament to happen anytime soon. And then 2 months later, Charlie Baker is saying we want to get it done for next year. Those two things seem wildly apart from each other. First of all, But we know that there's a lot of posturing, that there's a lot of, these people are effectively government officials. They're not exactly, but they sort of are. And they're trying to get their message and their thoughts and their, what they believe and their kind of framing of things out there in the open. Charlie Baker seems like he wants NCAA tournament expansion. So he's pushing for that. He's pushing for that to happen as soon as possible. Dan Gavitt, his full quote, basically talked about the complications of expansion. And he's not giving his opinion here necessarily. Rather, he's saying this is not something that you can just do quickly. And again, he said this, and then like 6 weeks to 2 months later, his boss is saying, we're trying to get it done this year. But here's what Dan Gavitt said. He said, quote, expansion, even in a modest level, is complex, more complex, I think, than has been recognized and reported because it is expensive. It's expensive because of additional team travel, per diem, game operations, but also the basketball performance funds, the units that are earned throughout the men's and women's basketball championships. So again, Dan Gavitt, who's more involved in the actual day-to-day operations of what this might look like, is saying, hey, this is very complicated. It's expensive. It's difficult. It's complex. And then Charlie Baker's saying, let's just get it done this year. And we also, by the way, we don't even know how many teams. We're talking about 72 or 76. So color me skeptical that this is actually going to happen in 2026. I would expect the odds of that happening to be like under 15%. The odds of it happening in the next 3 to 5 years, much higher than I would like them to be, much higher than many of you would like them to be. I have said on the show many times that I'm not a proponent of expanded NCAA tournament. It's not something that I am in favor of. I have softened how much I dislike it for a couple of reasons that I'll lay out here, but it is still not something that I am in support of. My vote would be 68. If given a vote, for some reason, I would stick hard at 68. There would be no debate. That's what I would pick. But the reason that I've softened a little bit is because I think it's inevitable. I think it is going to happen, and I think it is going to happen soon. So I think it's more of just like maybe an acceptance than anything else, but also the people who are pushing for NCAA tournament expansion are the commissioners of the SEC and the Big Ten, the people who run the big conferences. They are not people pushing for expansion because they want to see San Francisco in the tournament. They want to see Indiana State or UC Irvine, two recent mid-major darlings who were snubbed from the tournament, or Santa Clara, or take your pick. I mean, we know as people in the WCC, we've seen very good teams not make the tournament year in and year out. We've also seen very crappy high major conference teams make the tournament year in and year out. The people who are pushing for expansion want more of those crappy teams. They want more teams that finish under 500 in the Big Ten or the SEC or the Big 12 to make the tournament and less mid-major teams. And that's the key. Because if expansion doesn't happen, those people who have a ton of pull and sway and power are going to attack one of the very fabrics of the NCAA tournament's greatness, which is the automatic qualifier. The fact that if you win the Big South or the Southland or the Horizon or whatever other small major conference that you play in, you make the tournament bar none. You win your league, you win your conference championship, you make the tournament. That is it. It is as simple as that. You could go, in some cases, you could go 5 and 15 in your conference in the regular season, 5 and 13, get a 10 seed in the NCAA or in your conference tournament, go on a heater and get an automatic bid. The Cinderella story is alive in NCAA tournament right now. If they remove the automatic qualifier, it is a death sentence. What is the point at that point? Hundreds, over 200 college basketball programs instantly have a less than 0.1% chance of ever making the NCAA tournament. It's gone. It's gone. It's just not happening. Now every team every year has a chance, unless you are like a transition period or on probation or something like that. You have a chance, and you have a chance into February or March. The first team eliminated fully mathematically from making the NCAA tournament typically doesn't happen until like March 1st. You always have a chance. And if they eliminate the automatic qualifiers, that's gone. And to me, that would be so much worse. And if giving them 4 more teams is going to allow us to keep the automatic qualifier and keep the magic, because this event is nearly perfect. It is nearly perfect. It is the last bastion of great athletics in college sports, in professional sports, because it's basically professional sports at this point. It is one of the few opportunities to truly see this kind of story. And I hate that they want to take it away. I do. I hate it. I hate it. But they do. They do want to take it away. And the thing is, maybe I'm cynical, but they're probably going to succeed. they're probably going to succeed. And maybe we can fight it off a little bit longer if we give them 4 more at-large bids. And we know that these teams are crap. They always are. I mean, look, here's the deal. The SEC got 14 of their 16 teams made the tournament last year. 14 out of 16 SEC teams made the tournament. That's an all-time record. And yeah, the SEC was great. And I don't even think there's a ton of debate that most of these teams probably deserve to make it. And while the storyline was like, oh, they also had a bunch of teams in the Elite Eight and they had 2 teams in the Final Four, that's all true. But here's the thing. The bottom half of the teams from the SEC that made the tournament, they didn't do very good. 6 of the teams that made the tournament, so 6 out of 14 from the SEC, were 8 seeds or lower. Those teams went 1-5 in their first round. The only team that won that was an 8 seed or lower out of the SEC was Arkansas, who of course went to the Sweet 16 because John Calipari finally figured out how to win multiple games in the NCAA tournament. But that's it. Gonzaga crushed Georgia, an 8 seed over a 9 seed. St. Mary's beat Vanderbilt, a 7 seed over a 10 seed. Baylor beat Mississippi State, who was an 8 seed. UConn beat Oklahoma, who was a 9 seed. Xavier beat Texas in a play-in game as an 11 seed. All of those SEC teams lost in the first round. Arkansas was the only one that made it. So, I mean, again, like, would that results have been different if those teams had been UC Irvine and San Francisco and teams like that? I don't know. Probably not. Maybe not. I'd have rather seen it, though. I'd have rather seen it than the 13th best team in the SEC making the tournament. That just doesn't feel like Oklahoma went 6-12. They went 6-12 in the SEC and then got their doors blown off by UConn in the first round of the tournament. What are we doing? Why is it that team? I would much rather see UConn play San Francisco. Much rather see it. Much rather see that. And you know what? UConn might have blown the doors off San Francisco. That's very likely what would have happened, or at least possible. But I would have rather seen that. So, again, 68 is my preference. 72, I don't know when they play all those play-in games. I think it gets logistically very difficult. You have to play play-in games like a day after Selection Sunday. That's hard on the staffs, the director of basketball ops. That's hard on a travel schedule. There's a lot of complications that come with it that I'm not sure how they solve. But I prefer that to getting rid of the automatic qualifier. And if that's what we need to do to stave off these wolves that want to turn this thing into an event that's basically just all of the 3-4 power conferences playing each other every year and no mid-majors, if that's what we need to do to prevent that reality from happening, fine, so be it. This is another story we'll keep you updated on as we hear more about this. Again, I think it's pretty unlikely that Charlie Baker's vision of having a 72 or 76 field team field coming in 2026. I think it's pretty unlikely, but if it does happen, we'll talk about it more on the show here. We'll keep you up to date on this recruiting updates as well, and of course the conference realignment saga. But for now, that's going to wrap it up here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Folks, thank you for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day. We'll be back later this week, more updates on the NBA draft and Ryan Nembhard's pursuit of getting selected, more updates on the NBA finals as they get underway on Thursday. Of course, any more updates on Gonzaga's recruiting and transfer portal targets will come out as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And of course, as always, go Zags.